Um, this little bit of the session, we actually properly have to run the time because it's being streamed online. So there is no Slido. I know you really enjoyed Slido this morning, but for this particular session, there is no Slido. So please don't ask any questions on Slido. I'm not looking at it. Um, So the session today will run 20 minutes, as we've done before, kind of discussion amongst the group, and then 10 minutes for Q&A. So there will be plenty of opportunities for you to ask questions. So I think that's about it. I'll move subtly towards the panel session, um, and I can't start too early either. I've got 1 minute to go. We should come up with a game to kill 1 minute. So what we'll do is we'll just do some intros for the guys that are kind of joining online. That's not a very compelling start, is it really? I got ahead of myself. Oh yes, I've got 1 minute. Feedback forms, they're on your table. If you like pen and ink, there's paper for you as well. Otherwise, please use the Slido. Oh no, it's a Google Forms feedback form. Your input is much appreciated. We do actually read the feedback forms, so they're great. Right. So good afternoon, everyone. We've now got the panel session of today's event. We're going to talk to a topic. It took us many hours to craft the topic that we're going to cover off today in the panel session, which is what's going to generate the most paranoid uncertainty for the payments market in 2024. And I'm joined by three fantastic speakers and panel members. Maybe for the benefit of people who weren't lucky enough to hear you speak this morning, everybody could briefly introduce themselves. We'll dive into the content. Nadia, do you want to start?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Nadia Bennett. I look after strategic accounts at TrueLayer, and TrueLayer are an open banking payments network.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Ali. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO for Gravy, which is an online payment orchestration platform.
Hi, everyone. My name is Moshe Weingarten. I'm Chief Revenue Officer at EconPay, a full-stack PSP.
Great. Thanks, guys. So last week, I don't know whether anybody here voted on this. Hopefully it's going to move on. But we asked a question on LinkedIn about 4 topics that were of interest to the payments community. The 4 topics were the digital euro, generative AI. There we go. There we go. The digital euro, generative AI, PSD3, PSR, and fintechs and equity market valuations. The original question we did have was, what topic's going to generate the most hot air in the payments industry in 2024? But I felt that was a little bit harsh on some of the topics here. So maybe I could kick off by each of you talking to your favorite topic from that list, or indeed something else that you think is of interest. The people who voted on LinkedIn felt that generative AI was going to generate most uncertainty, but I'd great to get your views on what you think's going to be, the most uncertain elements of 2024. Nadia, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So shouldn't be any surprise that the favorite topic on there for me is PSD3 or PSR. But I would say that in agreement with the voters here, I don't think that's a topic of uncertainty next year. Neither is the digital euro, where again I'm in agreement with the voters, mainly because the EU will be pretty bogged down with European parliamentary elections next year. I think they'll spend most of the year trying to prepare for the election. There will probably be a lot of lobbying going on here. Everybody, putting forward ideas or countering ideas. But I don't think that those two, in my eyes, are topics of uncertainty or paranoia for next year. However, I totally agree with the voters in terms of generative AI. And yeah, with to some extent then followed with the fintech and equity market valuation. Should I leave it at that for now?
That's absolutely perfect. Yeah, Ali, your views?
I'm gonna start like by echoing what Nadia said in terms of the other two, the bottom two. I would say I don't think digital euro or digital currency at the moment is going to create any uncertainty, and especially I mean like for next year. And I agree like PSD3 also is not going to create any uncertainty in the market. I would say, but however, I do not agree with generative AI in that in what the voters actually was on LinkedIn because I think. Generative AI is definitely a new topic, new subject, and well, the generative part of it is new. I don't think AI is new in particular because it's been around for many years, and what we see in AI, from my point of view, is like basically like now hardware basically providers and there are a few things that are like catching up, like the consumers habits and the hardware as I mentioned before to be able like to use AI you needed to have like, really powerful like computers to actually like do anything but now your phone is basically like the iPhones and the Android phones that we use like the smartphones that we use powerful enough to like, provide a lot of like computing engine and like power for us and we can leverage AI. And I think also like the culture of like, if I don't know 10, 15 years ago you would ask someone, oh, I'm gonna talk to a device and say switch off the lights in the living room for me, like I would okay, like, it's a bit far fetched, but now like everyone or like, would actually think, okay, now I'm gonna look like an idiot if I want to do that, and but now I think like you see like people are more kind of receptive to actually doing that, and so that's AI catching up because it's more affordable, more available. But generative part of it just basically the how you interact with AI, which is kind of new. Like you can actually talk to it. You can either by typing or like now, like you can see like even ChatGPT and I said you can actually like do it like a voice with ChatGPT as well. And it's so that part is new, but it's going to create a lot of hype. It's going to create a lot of opportunities from my point of view, but not certainly. I think for payments specifically and for fintechs is what's happening in the market and like the valuations and the everything that is happening in the market. Basically, I think that continuing what's happening now and like, it's going to continue next year. That's from my point of view.
Well, that's great. Moshi?
Slightly different mix. I think answering the question in its pure sense, power and uncertainty. I think probably out of all of those, I think the fintech and equity market valuations probably creating the most uncertainty and paranoia in there. Which I think if you're in a VC-backed company or in a listed company, it's something you're always going to keep an eye on, but probably not necessarily much you can impact. PSD3, PSRs is interesting in maybe in open banking specifically. Gen AI, I think, is the short term. The opportunities next year, specific areas within payments, present probably the most immediate opportunities to start playing and inventing. But just to be a bit different from like, the panelists, at a macro level, a long term, the CBDCs are just interesting. The more we think about them, and just watching them develop, nothing's going to happen. No major shifts, as Nadia was saying, next year, but watching the development and which central bank moves first, they could present the biggest shift for the payments industry when they start coming about. So watching them coming, understanding how they're approaching, understanding the speed, and beginning to think about what are the knock-on impacts. And it's not going to happen immediately; it's going to happen overnight. But to me, it's something really exciting to watch. Even if it's a good 3, 4, 5 years away plus. It's coming nearer, and I think it is inevitable. We're going to see some CBDCs, and I'm excited for the opportunities those bring.
Maybe specifically talking to the Gen AI area, lots of kind of thoughts about how it may affect voice interactions. If I could just get Alexa to do basic things around the house without having to shout it 2 or 3 times, that would be a great step forward. Maybe it's my accent. But in terms of kind of other use cases, specifically within the payments world, I don't know whether you've come across any really exciting use cases, or you think that there are particular areas that you think is going to change the payments world more or less. I mean, do you want to start?
So we're seeing it in a few areas. none of them at this stage, do I think is radical change. Certainly in fraud, we recently brought in graph analysis and then leveraging AI on top of that is exciting. We're seeing results. I think there've been some specialists in fraud who've been playing with it for a couple of years, but now I think it's really beginning to accelerate. Seeing that in some of our tech document specifications as well, translations, definitely as we kind of branch into new markets, and then a little bit in customer support and ticketing and response. I think none of these are, I don't think are any particularly radical to anyone in the room or new, but certainly Gen AI being applied more practically and more real world in those areas. As yet, I think to do any radical changes, I think it's a little early to start applying that. What I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. Like, at the moment, anyone I talk to, they are basically saying that, yeah, like we using Gen AI, especially for customer service or the automated chatbot, and basically, like, as a payment company right now, like for example, we have like a massive API documentation, and like the API, like an API spec, you can train the AI to basically like, consume that, and like if someone comes and say a developer say, yeah, I want to like into how do I start like enabling, I don't know, Apple Pay on my website? It can tell you like step by step and provide guidance, which is one of the, I think, use cases not just for payment, it's for everyone. And I think the rest of it is like also like many companies are trying to like say, okay, yeah, we're using that because it helps with valuation and like getting recognition in the industry as well. To be honest, it's a little bit of hype. One of the things that I think is going to be a valid use case, and we can basically use that especially for payments as well, but it's not limited to payment industry. It's how you get some insight and like generate reports, for example, from your own data on basically on modeled or like unprocessed data, for example. Because if you think about like if you go to linking it to the payment again, like if you go to your payment provider and you want to see how many like authorization failed and what percentage of that was like, like a debit card or like whatever, like all of those like different like reports that you want to generate. And like historically, you have to like put them into like I don't know like a Tableau or like something, and then create the reports, and then you have like analysts like working and generating that for you, and like they're all like set already. So like and if you want a new report or new analysis, you have to like find a way again like to create that for yourself, and or like your analyst to like analysis team to do that for you. But with Gen AI, I think it's we're not already there yet. We're gonna be there very soon. That basically you can either like type, okay, I want to see like all like across all my like payments or like all my data, which type of like which one of my payment providers are, for example, like providing has the most latency or the highest latency, or I want to see like my auth rate, and like you can generate bespoke reports and like get much better insights, which doesn't require like a lot of time of like development or like someone a specialist that can go and like digest the data for you and create those reports. I think that's one of the good use cases that I can see, and but I haven't seen many providing that yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ability to manage even the structured data. I know we use some big data tools in the office to look at authorization improvement opportunities, looking at decline response codes, being able to interact with those large data sets in an intuitive manner, and cutting out some of the layers of analysis which currently get in the way of that. I think that's a really great kind of opportunity, and possibly one that could happen relatively quickly. I don't think we necessarily need to wait for lots of adoption.
Definitely.
And lots of consumers of that information. But Nadia, I don't know your views on it.
So I'm coming from a completely different angle here, I'm afraid. Reading at like, what do we need to be most paranoid about? And I think about generative AI, we all need to be paranoid about it. If you think about how generative AI is used on the dark side, you can get a version of generative AI, worm GPT, on the dark web, and that will easily help you to create hacking attacks, spoofing, spamming, anything to deceive us innocent consumers into giving away access to accounts, sending money somewhere. And unfortunately, generative AI has supercharged these fraudsters' enterprises, and they are run like enterprises. So I'm sure there's merchants here or in the industry that are now daily fighting with these kind of attacks. Being, and particularly finance teams within businesses, particularly those where the leadership potentially is in the public eye, where the voice can be captured, images can be captured. And I don't want to be too dark here, but deep fakes, imitating voices of CEOs calling the head of finance saying, sending money here. This can all happen now. So I think we should all be paranoid about it. And the scary thing is a little bit that on the good side, we're a bit behind in catching up. I haven't really seen any generative AI fraud tools launch. Okay, I'm not deep into the fraud world anymore like I was when I was working at CyberSource. But certainly, I think we have some catching up to do. And I'm like, is this the beginning of AI wars, the good versus the bad? Because it does feel a bit like the bad AI is a step ahead now, with anything in fraud, fraud management in the payments world, fraudsters always find a way to get around controls. They figure tools out. They know when the fraud team's off, even in some cases, right? So I think the payment industry has some catching up to do to keep on top of what is happening with generative AI on the fraudster side.
Maybe thinking about that topic, the area of sort of onboarding, which is, we were talking about account information services earlier, it's a very painful process of understanding who your customer is and the regulatory obligations that come along with it. There's an opportunity to use some of these tools to speed that process up. But I think to the point you just raised, it also makes it easier for fraudsters to spoof those tools, or indeed people. Yeah. The social engineering that comes along with those.
One of the things that I think maybe could mitigate some of this relatively easy is to automate vulnerable manual processes so that they can't be interjected with social engineering or whatever. Because it's so easy now to create fake invoices, documents that look like real with generative AI. It's frightening.
And a lot of people get frustrated with strong customer authentication. Yeah. And Jan was talking earlier on about some of the changes to SCA. Do you think that the pain that we in the payments industry has had to go through to validate that the customer is who they say they are at a payment transaction will be a more frequent part of interacting with any organisation, that both parties have to validate that they are who they say they are? I mean, it would slow the process down as it has in the commerce world to have to authenticate each time, but you'd have more confidence. I believe it's Monzo has rolled out a product that says, I will tell you who I say I am, that I'll use the app as a form of validation. So maybe we'll see more of that. But it's certainly paranoid and uncertain. So there's good topics to talk about. I'm just interested on the digital euro. Moshe, you mentioned that it's probably going to be a longer term change, but one that could be very, very substantial in terms of its scale. I mean, do you think it presents an existential crisis? Because if it's run by a central bank and it's offered at very low cost and it's ubiquitous and it's legal tender, so you have to accept it, where does that leave the payments industry?
I mean, if I was working for the Daily Mail, then yes, it would be an I tend to think of these more just the opportunities, right? Nothing's going to change radically overnight. I think it's going to come in there, and there's going to be opportunities for new types of services, new businesses, new entities to work within there. Yes, it calls into question: will we need third-party and networks in the middle? Right. Well, in theory, a CBDC can be passed across, but then, how we store our digital currencies or central bank digital currencies is going to be interesting. Do we store it in our bank? Do banks need to acquire, cold storage, hot storage, kind of companies? Even if in theory you don't need a third-party network to support the transaction, still, if I'm a business, do I want something like an acquirer on my behalf? Are there multiple currencies handling those? Are those, do exchanges now morph into pseudo acquiring services? So I don't think there's an existential threat. I think it raises some really interesting questions. And I think, and we've seen this all before in the industry, everyone's very conservative when it comes to money, right? No one wants to be too radical, right? So we want to be careful. We want to work in the ways which are something familiar to how, to what we have. But yes, if they will, the improvements in speed and cost and all customer experience. So I'm excited for what we're doing. I have loads of questions myself, which I don't have answers to. So I'm just kind of excited to see what emerges. And then also, what part can we play? Where are the gaps which needs to be solved for? Which maybe, companies which aren't looking ahead, missing opportunities to come and leverage.
Ali, your views on the digital euro, or indeed the digital pound?
Yeah, very similar to Moshe, to be honest. I think you also hinted in the previous question that I think it's gonna be from central banks in Europe and in UK is gonna be okay, who's going to actually do it first? And in some degree, I can see that they're trying not to be the first, but they also want to be the first. And then so it's a little bit of that kind of internal challenge between them, and also they also don't want to be last. So it's who's going to lead it and who's going to be the first one and lead the change. But for me as well, it's going to be more of an opportunity rather than an uncertainty. And I remember maybe about 14, 15 years ago when all the NFC and contactless payments were coming out. I remember the limit was only up to £10 in the UK, and I remember other countries they were oh my god, yeah, it's never gonna happen. And I clearly remember some genuine industry leaders and world leaders in the commerce and tech world, and with a lot more influence than myself, for example. They were on a stage, on global stage, where they're standing and saying NFC it stands, for example, for not for commerce, and calling it that. And literally a few years later, Apple put NFC on every iPhone, and then it changed everything. And and now of course it's widely accepted everywhere. And it's people, I think, are not just people and consumers, even on the businesses, more open to accept all of these new technology and new standards, and it's more, to me, it's opportunity rather than uncertainty.
Nadia, your view?
I think it's a long road to the digital euro, and who needs to be paranoid about it is probably the schemes and the banks, because they have to probably do a lot of work to make this happen. But at the same time, I also think it's an opportunity for a lot of fintechs to facilitate those transactions, because it's not like the central bank will go out and enable technology. But there are concerns about privacy, which some of the countries in Europe are very, very concerned about. For example, Germany and France, they're hot on that topic, aside from the usual GDPR stuff. The digital pound, I think, is slightly different now, right? Because was it yesterday or this morning, there was this release about the fact that it's not going to be a wholesale CBDC, but more like a retail CBDC. And that's more like another payment method. So I think it'd be interesting to see how that develops. If that's going to be quicker than a digital euro, who knows?
We'll have to wait and see.
Yes.
I don't know whether anybody on the audience has got any questions about any of these topics, or indeed anything else that you think may be generating paranoid uncertainty. James, I don't know where the...
Yes, over there.
Thanks.
I'm going to embarrass myself. It's quite heavy.
Speaking of paranoia, I think now that we are, and I hate to ask the banking question, but now that we are no longer in a low interest rate environment, where money was very inexpensive, particularly in kind of, let's call it growth fintech, as opposed to kind of revenue fintech, or even, God forbid, profitability fintech. In terms of paranoia for 24, do we think across the board, across these topics, I don't want to single out one, but do we see a lot of consolidation? Do we see a lot of closures? I mean, how do we think this is going to shake out over the next 2 years in kind of payments related fintech?
Who wants to go on that one?
Happy to go. I don't think it's any surprise, right? We've seen it happening the last few years as interest rates have climbed, as the funding market has changed dramatically from what it was a couple of years ago. And speaking to a lot of friends and colleagues in different types of companies, there's some which are VC-backed companies, some enlisted companies, others still in bootstrapped ones. The feeling is very different. There will inevitably be some mergers, some closures, unfortunately. But I think there is a lot of, you could say it's about time, but a lot of pressure on the focus on profitability, right? We've seen some of the downsizing as companies have pivoted to focus on that, and there are those emerging, and I think they're well on their way and they're in a good position to achieve that. So it proves their business model was right. So it's been a difficult year or so. I think actually we've possibly peaked and we're coming towards it, but to some of the things I was saying earlier in my earlier presentation, I think there's putting aside the interest rates and the funding, right? I think there are certain features, products, services which make more sense from an economies of scale perspective to merge and be part of a wider suite of solutions from a single provider. So definitely see that ahead in some of our lines of industry and payments.
Whether you guys have got a view?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's. I think the fintech industry, again, my personal view is there were a lot of noises and a lot of it was a massive bubble in a way that needed a little bit of detox and maybe cleansing, and I think that's kind of what's happening, and it's not a new thing. It's we've seen that many times. That circle, not just in payments and fintech as well. It's been happening many times, and we see another bubble shaping up now. Of course, not maybe one, maybe a few, which we can name probably with Gen AI and a lot of other things. But and when I went to on the AI side, I went to Google's Next, which they were all focused about their AI in California. You see a lot of companies, startup and scale-ups, basically partnering with Google and or they were exhibiting there, and it was really great to see. But at the same time, it was a bit sad for me. I was thinking to myself that within 1 or 2 years, most of these companies would not exist. Either been acquired by Google or the likes of these big companies, or they just completely out of business because those big companies are offering that. But so yeah, it's kind of a part of the life cycle of part of life, I would say.
Yeah, I think the days of the race to become a unicorn are well and truly over. How quickly can you get to 1 billion evaluation? I think there's a move now to a new term. The quickest to get to 100 million in revenue, the Centaur instead. And it's become clear that it's now about sustainability, having a quick path to profitability, and the people that need to be uncertain or paranoid about this topic specifically are the businesses that haven't figured that out yet. Next year is going to be the wheat from the chaff, I think, is the saying. Those that don't have a path to profitability, that can't demonstrate a sustainable business model, will not be able to get another funding round, and they will slowly whittle away. I think that's the sad truth. There will be a great opportunity for other fintechs to buy others, the ones that whittle away, maybe the technology, the IP, the staff, the knowledge, and big tech to make a good bargain, or banks to make a good bargain, or incumbent even. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that you two, as founders of the business, put that as your top priority for next year, or the topic that you chose. Understandably, I think uncertainty is also for employees that work for these businesses, because they don't know what is going to happen, and they will know whether their company, their employer, or their leadership is on the path to profitability or not.
And I suppose for many of the people in this room who work on the acceptance side, who don't have big consumer brands that need to be funded, the expansion program to be funded. Obviously, there are players like Klarna who have invested very significantly in building consumer brands in recent years, but in the B2B payment world, it tends to be that the model has always been designed around making money out of each transaction, right? In the consumer world, in the neobank world, there's a lot of loss-leading kind of attempts to gain market share. I think, again, maybe get your views on it, but do you think that most of the business models that you come across are profitable on a per transaction basis from day one? I mean, is that a good starting point as this path to profitability? Is that enough to prove to your shareholders that on every transaction I make money? Right? That's not necessarily true in other parts of the payments industry.
Oh.
I don't know whether you've got any views on that.
I mean, yeah, certainly. So, I'd say that there's a big difference between consumer side and the B2B side of things. Even and within B2B and within the payments, stack and the different services provide, yeah, there's definitely fees per click per service, but whether those are profitable or and I think it comes or stack up to be profitable is definitely challenging. So you see all those types of models. I think some of those have been allowed and had the funding and the runway to build up to try and reach profitability, but I think there are some which fundamentally will struggle in the long term to be profitable as a standalone solution. And I think that's going to become clearer over the next year or two.
Sounds good. We've probably got time for one more question, if there's anything more from the audience. There's no Slido. Okay, well, maybe in the interest of time, we can wrap up there. Just say thanks very much to the panel members for your input and for those that may be online for watching. And we'll wrap up the panel session. So thank you very much, guys.
Yep.
Whoops, drop the clicker. So.